I was standing in the center of the ballroom when my boss grabbed the microphone and destroyed me in front of everyone I worked with. It was our company's annual investor dinner. Black ties, crystal glasses, the kind of night where careers get made or broken under chandeliers that cost more than my yearly salary. My boss, Steve, had been drinking since cocktail hour. His face was flushed, his tie loosened, and he had that dangerous look people get when they confuse cruelty with charisma. He pointed at me across the room. "You see her? That's what happens when we lower our standards. 3 years later, and she still needs her hand held through every project." The room erupted in laughter. Executives, coworkers, even the VP who'd complimented my work an hour earlier. I stood there, frozen, while 200 people laughed at a joke I hadn't agreed to be part of. What Steve didn't know was that by the end of that night, the joke would be on him. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Let me take you back 3 years. I started at Meridian Capital as a mid-level analyst. Nothing flashy. I wasn't the loudest voice in meetings or the first one to take credit when things went well. I was the person who stayed late fixing other people's mistakes, the one who double-checked reports before they went to clients, the one who caught errors that would have cost the firm millions. But here's the thing about being competent and quiet. People forget you exist until something breaks. Steve learned quickly that he could slap his name on my work and no one would question it. A projection model I built, his innovation. A client pitch I restructured overnight, his strategic vision. I told myself it didn't matter. I wasn't there for glory. I was there to build a career, get promoted, and eventually move into a position where my name would be on the door instead of the footnotes. So I stayed quiet. I stayed focused. And Steve, he got promoted twice on the back of work I did in silence. If I stayed quiet, I stayed employed. That silence would cost him more than he realized. The investor dinner wasn't just another corporate party. This was the night Meridian Capital announced a major acquisition, a $400 million deal that would put us in the top tier of financial consulting firms in the region. The ballroom was packed with hedge fund managers, private equity partners, and senior executives who could end careers with a handshake or the lack of one. When I walked in, I immediately noticed where they'd seated me. Table 12, far from the stage, wedged between HR coordinators and junior accountants, the non-essential staff section. Meanwhile, Steve was at table 2, right next to the CEO and the lead investor from the acquiring firm. I wasn't surprised. I'd written half the financial models that made this acquisition possible, but I wasn't the one who'd present them. That honor went to Steve, who would stand on stage, smile for the cameras, and take credit for months of work he barely understood. I watched him from across the room, laughing too loud, refilling his glass too often, playing the part of the successful executive. He looked so comfortable up there, so confident, so completely unaware of what was coming. And that's when I realized something. I wasn't invited to be recognized. I was invited to be background. The speeches started around 8 p.m. The CEO went first, thanked the team, talked about vision and growth, and all the buzzwords that make investors nod approvingly. Then Steve took the stage. He was already drunk. Not stumbling drunk, but loose. The kind of drunk where the filter comes off and people mistake cruelty for honesty. He started fine, talked about the deal, thanked the team in broad, meaningless terms. Then he saw me. "You know," he said, leaning into the microphone with a grin, "we've got all kinds of people on this team. Some are rock stars, some are projects." A few people chuckled. "Take her, for example." He pointed directly at me. "That's Sarah. Sweet girl, works hard, but let me tell you, 3 years in and we're still teaching her the basics. I swear, sometimes I think we hired her to fill a quota." The room erupted. Laughter bounced off the marble floors and vaulted ceilings. I saw people I respected, people I'd worked beside for years, covering their mouths, shaking their heads, enjoying the show. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stood there, feeling 200 pairs of eyes on me, while Steve milked the moment for every drop of humiliation it was worth. He raised his glass in my direction. But hey, we keep her around. Somebody's got to do the grunt work, right? More laughter. I felt my face burn. My hands trembled slightly at my sides, but I kept my expression neutral. Because even in that moment, even while being torn apart in front of my colleagues, I knew something Steve didn't. That's when I understood. This wasn't a joke. It was a warning. I didn't leave. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I walked back to my table, sat down, and placed my hands flat on the white tablecloth. The woman next to me, someone from HR I'd never spoken to, leaned over and whispered, "I'm sorry, that was completely out of line." I nodded, said nothing, because in that moment, sitting in that ridiculous ballroom with my career being mocked for entertainment, I made a decision. This is the last time he controls the room. See, Steve didn't know what I knew. He didn't know that the lead investor from the acquiring firm, a woman named Jennifer, had requested me specifically for a private briefing 3 days earlier. She didn't want Steve. She didn't want the CEO. She wanted the person who actually built the models, the person who knew where the risks were buried, the person who could answer her questions without corporate doublespeak. That person was me. And Jennifer was supposed to arrive at this event in less than 20 minutes. I checked my watch, 8:42 p.m. She'd texted me earlier, saying her flight landed at 8:15. She'd be here any minute. I already knew exactly how to end it. At 8:49 p.m., the ballroom doors opened. Jennifer walked in. She was impossible to miss, tall, sharp-featured, wearing a charcoal suit that commanded attention without asking for it. She had the kind of presence that made conversations stop mid-sentence. Steve saw her immediately. His entire demeanor changed. He straightened his tie, handed his drink to someone nearby, and started making his way toward her with the CEO in tow. But Jennifer wasn't looking at them. She was scanning the room. Then her eyes landed on me. She walked directly to table 12. "Sarah?" I stood. "Jennifer, good to see you again." "I'm sorry I'm late. Flight got delayed." She smiled, then glanced around at the table. "I was hoping we could go over those last-minute adjustments you mentioned, the sensitivity analysis on the debt structure. I want to make sure we're aligned before we finalize tomorrow." I nodded. "Of course, I have the updated models on my laptop. We can step into one of the conference rooms if you'd like." "Perfect." She turned to leave, then paused and looked back at Steve, who had frozen mid-step about 10 feet away. His smile had faltered. His eyes darted between Jennifer and me, trying to piece together what was happening. "Steve," she said coolly, "I'll catch up with you later. Sarah and I have some work to finish." The room went quiet. Not the kind of quiet where people are waiting for the next joke, the kind of quiet where everyone suddenly realizes they've missed something important. Steve's face went pale, then red, then pale again. I could see the wheels turning in his head, the realization hitting him in waves. Because in that single moment, in front of every executive and investor in that ballroom, it became very clear who actually mattered. Jennifer and I spent 40 minutes in a conference room going over projections, risk assessments, and contingency plans. She asked detailed questions, the kind only someone who'd actually built the models could answer. She wanted to understand the assumptions, the stress tests, the scenarios I'd mapped out for different market conditions, and I answered every single one. When we came back, the energy in the ballroom had shifted. Steve was at the bar, alone. The CEO was in a corner, having what looked like a very serious conversation with 2 board members. I caught glimpses of their expressions. They didn't look happy. Jennifer walked me back to the main floor, shook my hand, and said, loud enough for people nearby to hear, "Thank you, Sarah. Your work on this has been exceptional. We wouldn't be moving forward without it." Then she left. I didn't go back to table 12. I walked toward the exit, grabbing my coat from the check. On my way out, I passed Steve. He tried to laugh it off. "Hey, Sarah, glad you could help out Jennifer. You know how investors are. Always want to talk to the worker bees." I stopped, looked him in the eye.
She didn't want to talk to a worker bee, Steve. She wanted to talk to the person who actually knows what they're doing. His smile disappeared. You should have thought about that before you made me the punchline of your joke. I didn't wait for a response. I walked out of that ballroom with my head held high. For the first time, no one laughed when he spoke.
By Monday morning, Steve was transitioning into an advisory role, corporate speak for sidelined. 2 weeks later, he was gone entirely. The CEO personally called me into his office and offered me Steve's position. More money, better title, an actual seat at the table. I thanked him, and then I declined, because I'd already accepted an offer from Jennifer's firm, one that came with a significant raise, equity, and something I'd never had at Meridian: respect. My last day at the company was quiet. A few people stopped by my desk, some apologized, some pretended that night never happened. I didn't hold grudges, I just left. Because here's what I learned: I didn't need revenge. I just stopped protecting someone who never protected me. If your boss embarrassed you publicly, would you walk away or wait for the right moment?